Hey cool kids, you're back with Beat Motel. This is Andrew flying solo again. Sam is in Helsinki looking for crabs. So here we go, the short history of the Amen break. Let's get the pronunciation out of the way first. Some call it Amen, which kind of makes sense because it's like the end of a prayer. Amen, Amen. But I'm going to call it Amen. It's a bit of a scone type situation. Right, I'm recording this episode a little differently because we're going to have plenty of sound clips, which isn't a new thing in the Beat Motel podcast, but I'm just doing it in a different way. If you're a geek and you want to know, I'm recording direct into Ableton, so first thing I need to do is have a little bit of a sound check. So we're going to sound check with something I don't think many of you will have heard. Well, I managed to slam the door on that just the same as I always do, even though I'm using Ableton. Never mind. Right, so that has nothing to do with the Amen break. That is... Do you know who it is? If you do know, you're probably shouting about now, or fist pumping the air, or something celebratory. That was Jackie Chan singing the theme tune to... That's right. The Police Story, one of the greatest kung fu films ever made. As I say, nothing to do with the Amen break, but it's just a cool tune I thought I would include. Right, let's crack on with the Amen break. What is it? Well, I need to kind of go back a bit first. I need to go further back than the Amen break to start explaining why I think it's such an important thing in the world of music. And we're going to start with sampling. So, what is sampling? Well, it's taking something from one thing and using it for another. I mean, hopefully I don't have to go into too much depth with explaining what sampling is. But what is the history of sampling? How did it come about? Well, first of all, you got organic sampling. I mean, this goes way back to the dawn of time. I mean, for example, Mozart famously was on a visit to the Vatican, and there's a certain piece of music that's only ever played in the Vatican, and it was kind of illegal as such to write down this piece of music. But Mozart, being Mozart, when he was a tiny little wee one, heard the music, went home and wrote out the score for it, and it turned into... wouldn't it have been nice if I had known the piece of music it turned into? But I'm going to call that organic sampling. That could be one caveman walking past another caveman's cave and hearing him kind of drumming on a skull or something and going, that sounds alright, going home and doing their own version of it. We're going to call that organic sampling, and it's done by ear. There's nothing more than your ears and your brain, and famously a lot of people have nicked songs, so I'm not casting aspersions because I think he admitted it, but Noel Gallagher has borrowed a few tunes. So I'd Like to Teach the World to Sing is a tune that he very much used in a big Oasis hit. But anyway, it's done by ear, and whether you're nicking something wholesale or just using it as inspiration, it's still sampling. Then there's a type of sampling which is a bit more involved. Sorry, I'm on my creaky chair, I don't know if you can hear that. Oh, it sounds like a guinea pig. Anyway, then there's another type of sampling which is a bit more involved, and it involves... I tell you what, I'm going to tell you the story of the Skatalites. Now, if you haven't heard of the Skatalites, they are a really cool ska band. They started from early 60s, I think, mid-60s at the very latest. And there was a funny old thing going on in Jamaica at the time, whereby you might be able to hear the latest pop hits from the UK or America on the radio, but you couldn't go and watch these bands play. No one was really going to Jamaica, so the Beatles, for example, probably never toured in Jamaica, but everyone likes live music, so they needed a solution. So what would happen is Jamaican bands like the Skatalites were effectively covers bands. You could go and watch the Skatalites, and they would play the famous songs that you knew by the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, whoever, but they do it in a ska style. So I'm going to call that ska style. Dear me. I'm going to call that sampling, because it's listening, adapting, repeating. That is absolutely sampling. Now the next type of sampling is sheet music, adapting sheet music. It's a relatively funny thing to think about now, but up until probably the mid-70s, bands made money not only from selling physical copies of their albums, but also by selling the sheet music for them. And you could buy the sheet music, adapt it, change it, and I'm going to call that sampling as well. But I think the final bit of sampling is probably the one I've done, and that's just being accidentally terrible at learning other people's songs. I've released a few songs over the years where I've been trying to learn how to play something and just kind of gone, hey, I'm kind of crap at this, and it sounds nothing like it, but it sounds original enough that I might call it one of my own songs. Right, so that's like a quick potted history of sampling. Let's get into some more of the details now. Mechanical sampling. I'm gonna have to draw a line here somewhere, and I don't think you listen to the Beat Motel podcast expecting accurate truth, but I have to draw a line in the sand somewhere and say this was the start. This particular date was the start of mechanical sampling, and I'm going to choose 1973, because 1973 was the year the first Mellotron went on sale. A Mellotron works by basically having lots of tape loops, and you play the keyboard and it plays the tape loops and does, quite frankly, stuff. I've looked up a diagram because I wanted to be able to try and explain it to you, and holy shit, it's complicated. Actually, before we go any further, I have actually made a presentation for this. I've made a PowerPoint because I gave a talk not dissimilar to this in public a few years ago. So I've adapted that presentation, and I'm going to make that available in the show notes. So when you get to the slide with the Mellotron on, you'll see this mad diagram for how it worked. I don't understand how it's a thing, but you'll know the sound of the Mellotron from the beginning of Strawberry Fields by the Beatles, Strawberry Fields Forever, I think the full title is, and it's just been used in a load of things. It's a very nice sound, it's a very haunting sound, and you can still buy Mellotrons now. So I had to go on one in a place called DV247 in glamorous Romford a couple of years ago, and they're bloody expensive but wonderful. So we'll call that mechanical sampling. Now the type of sampling that you're probably more used to is computer-ish sampling. We're doing this from oldest to newest, by the way, just in case you're losing track here. So in 1976, the computer music Melodian came out. PDP-8A, I think, was the model number. And this was the birth of something that you might recognise a bit more as sampling. So it's putting in music rather than the Mellotron, which was putting in recorded sounds, which you couldn't change. You buy a Mellotron, it has the sounds it has. It never expands further. So the computer music Melodian in 1976 was the first example of a sampler that you could put something in yourself. Cool, hey? And this was used quite a lot by Stevie Wonder on his album with the bonkers title of, well, the full title is Stevie Wonder's Journey Through the Secret Life of Plants. Now, I don't have a sound clip for you because I've got no idea how to pick out which of the songs on that album actually used the computer music Melodian. But just trust me, he used it a lot. We ought to go dig more into Stevie Wonder at some point. He's a fascinating and incredibly talented man who changed the face of music. So, what came after the computer music Melodian? Then we had something in 1979 called the Fairlight CMI, which looks like an old computer because that's basically what it is. It's got a huge keyboard with two manuals, two stacks of keys, and what looks like a Commodore 64. And it cost more than the Titanic. Well, I'm probably exaggerating a little bit, but not much. There was a story somebody told me recently of Howard Hughes, I want to say, but a famous electronic musician from the early 80s, saying that when he got his major label record advance, he bought a house and a Fairlight, and the Fairlight cost 10 times more than the house. These were insanely expensive, so not many people had them, but they were a very, very clever way of sampling that could play back very short snippets of sounds in ways that sounded absolutely exactly like the original. In fact, for 1979 is quite remarkable, not just the quality of the sampling, but also the fact that it's computer driven, because computers were not very powerful back then. And one of the most famous users of the Fairlight CMI was none other than Kate Bush. And if you search on Google, and I'll include it on the presentation, there's a brilliant photograph of Kate Bush sitting looking slightly pensive and prodding at a Fairlight CMI, and she's got the instruction manual for it sitting on top of it, and the instruction manual is, cool, young people won't know what I'm talking about if I say like the Yellow Pages used to be, but it's probably about 4 or 5 inches thick, or in modern money, I don't know, 15-20 centimeters thick. It's a big thing. And the thing I like about this photo is that Kate Bush, this really funny look on her face. She's like, are you going to point that camera somewhere else? And she's fiddling around with this. Behind her there's a full-scale harp, so it's not like she was short of instruments. But yeah, so Kate Bush, again, a lot of early Kate Bush will have the Fairlight CMI. I can't really pick out a particular song to make it really obvious, but it's one of those devices that you will definitely know the sound of, and you will have heard it on lots of recordings. Now, Kate Bush, in the world of sampling, was and early synthesizer use, was probably first of all one of the few people who could afford the devices, but also quite a celebrant of synths, which is quite an amazing to think back. I know we might think of her principally as a singer and perhaps a dancer, but yeah, very much a musician, and to the extent that she was on the cover of Keyboard magazine. I mean, this was in July 1985, and it's a whole article with Kate Bush talking technical stuff about the Fairlight CMI. So she's not just a casual user. She's not somebody who happened to have the money to buy one. She was a trooper. So after the Fairlight CMI, nothing really changed in a significant way for about 10 years. The next big change is the Akai MPC. So 1988, the Akai MPC 60 is launched, and it looks like a cash register. But this is where we start to see samplers looking a bit more like how they look now. There's finger drumming pads, there's a disk drive on the front. I know we don't have those now, but it looks like something. It looks more like an instrument. It looks more like something that an everyday human being could actually use. And the Akai MPC was a really important part of the development of hip hop, because early hip hop, the DJ would have a couple of decks, and he'd find the breaks. See, look, breaks. We are getting to the amen break, I promise. He'd find the breaks in songs and repeat them, flip them, by physically pushing and pulling the record on the deck to keep replaying the same bit whilst flipping between two decks with a crossfader, a slidey thing, which requires a phenomenal amount of skill, and in terms of repeatability is very, very difficult. The level of skill, if you're lucky enough to see a live DJ doing this kind of thing, I saw one with Black Alicious a few years ago. It's a hell of a thing to see. I genuinely don't know how it's possible. So the Akai MPC came along and basically allowed you to do the same thing, but it was repeatable. And you can also manipulate the sound in a number of ways, which more or less led to the modern hip hop sound. There's really, really funny little quirks with the Akai MPC, where some bits of it aren't massively reliable, and it can kind of slip out of timing a little bit. And that's what gave a lot of early hip hop its swing, gave it its swagger, is that it's technically not on the beat, or it's not quite in time. So there we are, the Akai MPC. So now that we've done that, I am actually going to start talking about the Amen break. I just want to talk about samplers and how so much of music has been shaped by artists taking music from one source and manipulating it and making something new. And I'm partly doing that so that the bits I'm about to reveal don't just sound like people straight up nicking shit. So as you probably guessed, the Amen break is a drum break. It's a bit from a record, and that record was by the Winstons. In fact, the drum break, the Amen break, was from the B-side of a single in 1969, and the B-side is called Amen Brother, and it sounds like this. Did you like that? Did you recognise that? I mean, to me, it's so obvious and so recognisable. I can see why so many other artists heard it and thought, you know what, I can do something with that. I mean, on a very mechanical level, it's also probably been sampled so many times, and I'll give you some numbers in a minute. It's been sampled so many times because there's clear air around it. Quite often a drum beat will still have a bass or a guitar or something else going on around that, but that one is so easy to separate, so easy to trim out of the song as a whole, that, you know, that's probably one of the reasons it's been used quite a lot. Now I'm going to give you some examples to show you how broadly this has been used, and the first example is Salt and Pepper with a single called I Desire in 1986.
We're on a mission, dissing all of the opposition. MCs, it's my butt you're kissing because I desire. Yo, wait a minute, I want y'all to hear why rap is not a joke for us, it's a career. Others try to imitate, but none has come near.
So it's slowed way down, it's pitched down by quite a lot, but that is very noticeably the Amen break. They even use the horns. When it comes back in, we've got the horns there. Now, part of the reason you might not that they weren't able to use the whole of the Amen break is that the sampling capabilities of the early MPCs, you could only get a very few seconds. Now, you know, the samplers we're using, Ableton, which I'm recording this on, has a brilliant sampler in it. You can have samples that are a week long if you want. I don't think there's any upper limit. But part of the creativity of the early use of the Amen break is that musicians were forced to use just a tiny little bit of it, and that really inspired a lot of creativity. I mean, Salt and Pepper, I can remember I'm old enough to remember, I don't remember this song, but I remember Salt and Pepper coming onto the scene and just thinking they were so thrilling. I mean, it's kind of wild that it took 20 years. This is the first instance of the Amen break being used that I could find, and there's 2 decades almost between that original single and the use of it by Salt and Pepper. So you might not remember that Salt and Pepper use of the Amen break, and to be fair, I didn't. I just, when I was researching this episode, it came up. But the next one is possibly going to surprise you even more, because I didn't know this was the Amen break, but you'll almost definitely know this track. In fact, I'm going to pause for a minute. What do you think is going to be the next in the chronological line of the use of the Amen break? What do you think is going to be next after Salt and Pepper? I'm going to give you 5 seconds to think about it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge.
Straight out of Compton, crazy motherfucker named Ice Cube. From the gang called niggas with attitudes. When I'm called off, I got a sawed off. Squeeze the trigger and bodies are hauled off. You too, boy, if you fuck with me. The police are gonna have to come and get me off your ass.
That's right, N.W.A, straight out of Compton, 1988. Again, that sound is brutal. That the production on that is quite amazing. Same drum break, different production. That boom on it just works so nicely. My suspicion with that is that boom is from a Roland 808. It's not the sample, but the very high clipped snare definitely is. The da da da. So the mix of the boom and the bap there, brilliant stuff. But what a cracking song. That still sounds good so many years later. So next example I have is an example of the amen break being used in a way that more or less inspired an entire genre. So we've talked about it being used in songs, but Salt and Pepper and N.W.A, hip hop was a genre that had been around for getting on 20 years by then. But the next example is an example of the amen break forming and inspiring probably 2 or 3 genres of music actually. So this next track is LTJ Bukem and the track is Atlantis. This is 1992, so we've taken a little bit of a leap forward, but here we go. Crazes me that we can't play more than 30 seconds for licensing reasons, which is ironic really, because this whole episode is about sampling and about usage of other people's work. But there you go, LTJ Bukem, one of the very early operators in jungle, then drum and bass. It's such a recognisable sound, and for a good long time, in fact probably still now, a lot of drum and bass is entirely based on the amen break. It's such a normal thing to hear, so completely standard. Now we've had a couple of massive acts on here so far. We've had Salt and Pepper and we had N.W.A, and arguably LTJ Bukem, I mean huge in some circles, but not as massive as those two. But the next example of use of the amen break is a band that was probably one of the biggest bands of the late 90s and continues to still pack out massive stadiums, and just a hugely important band. And I'm going to tell you who it is. What's the point in teasing you, eh? It's the Prodigy, and this track is Minefields from 1997. So close to LTJ Bukem, but to my mind so much more developed. I'm not actually a huge fan of the Prodigy. I don't know why. I don't have to explain why something doesn't float my boat. You don't care, do you? But the production Prodigy is phenomenal. That bass, oh god, it's so warm. It's warm and reassuring and heavy as fuck. Love it. Absolutely great. And although the presence of the amen break is clearly there, it's very manipulated. And I think you reach a certain point with sampling where you manipulate something so far, it does almost become your own thing. It almost becomes something new, but legally you have still sampled it. So next usage is probably my favourite of all the bunch, and it's much newer. We're on to 2005 now, and this is Venetian Snares with Samzar Madar. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that properly. From 2005. Now Venetian Snares I absolutely love, but it's called the forbidden music in my house. I am not allowed to listen to Venetian Snares unless I'm the only person in the house. I'm sort of saying that by way of warning, but I know that you are open-minded and you won't be offended. And now I've overhyped it, and you're probably going to be disappointed at how palatable this actually is compared to some of the more extreme music we talk about here on the Beat Motel podcast. So let's have a bit of Venetian Snares. Ooh yeah. Oh man, oh that's harsh. I deliberately chose that part of the track because it's got that really odd little bit in the middle where it just stops, it just breaks. I will include the video for this in the show notes because there's a brilliant part of the video for this. When that glitch happens, it shows on the screen a computer rebooting, but a computer from like the early 90s at a guess, because you see something called the BIOS start up. So, oh God, this is about as geeky as I can possibly get on a podcast. But I'll include that because that little beep, that means that your graphics card works. Oh dear me, it's such a trip down memory lane seeing that clip. But I'll include that. But there you go. Venetian Snares apparently using the Amen break. I can't really pick it out myself. It's in there somewhere. God, I do get a bit excited about Venetian Snares. Wow. So there's your rough and ready history of the usage of the Amen break. But who actually made it? Who was the drummer of the band? Who? Oh crap! I've forgotten their name. What was they called? The Winstons. What was the actual name of the drummer? His name was Gregory C. Coleman. And considering how many times his drumming has been sampled, how much money do you think he made? I mean, you probably know where this is going. Even if you don't know anything about the Amen break, you probably know where this is going. Because Gregory C. Coleman died homeless in 2006. The Amen break has a long history, but it's a long history of no one paying royalties, essentially. It's a bit grim in that respect. For such a brilliant little break that's been used so many times, it ain't great. Now, there was a GoFundMe. Richard Spencer, who was also in the band, did get some money. I mean, like 2015, there was a GoFundMe and he got 24 grand. So some money eventually went, but it's not from the artists. It's not from the people who have made, Prodigy, N.W.A, Salt and Pepper. Arguably, a lot of people have become millionaires, partly as a result of making music that includes the Amen break. There's a lot of money sloshing around somewhere, and none of it going to the artists. In fact, nobody in the band was even aware it was being used until 1996, by which point it had been on a lot of records. They'd absolutely no idea. Now, in America, the law around copyright infringement is strangely tight in favour of the people nicking it, I think, which is a surprise for America. I'd expect America to protect the money at all costs, but no. So the statute of limitations for copyright infringement is 3 years. So basically you can nick anything you want as long as you don't get caught for 3 years. You've got away with it, which just seemed stupid to me. Absolutely wild. Anyway, this wasn't meant to be an angry podcast. It's meant to be an informative one. So the Amen break, there's a lot of people who claim it is the most sampled track in history. And it could well be. I can't think of anything else, and I haven't been able to find any other sample that has contributed to so many tracks. In fact, there are 5,000 documented uses of the Amen break. 5,000. This is very much one of those things that once you know what it is and once you know what it sounds like, you're going to start hearing it. Like if if you buy a new car and it's red, you start seeing red cars everywhere. That sort of Baader-Meinhof theory. I can't remember what it's called. So it's a big thing. What other sample actually started genres? Amen break arguably started drum and bass. There's probably a bit of an argument to be had around that, but it's certainly a contributing factor. Well, there you go. What do you think of that? What did you think of the history of the Amen break? What are your favourite uses of the Amen break? Obviously, I whipped through history there because I didn't want to talk for ages and ages, and that's just my uses. I'm not saying they're my favourites, although possibly the Venetian Snares one is my favourite out of them. But there you go, we're at the end of the episode. Hope you liked that. Please let us know what you think of it. Please subscribe. Please tell everyone. It makes such a difference. Otherwise, we're just barking into the fucking void. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. We've got some really cool episodes lined up and a bit of travelling to reveal. Well, thanks for listening. You are cool, and I love you.